Hello friends and welcome back to Generation Pixel. And firstly, I would like to say a big thank you to everyone out there who watches these videos. And more importantly, a big thank you to everyone who subscribes. Okay, sorry for barging in your own personal time with this thing here, but unfortunately he's just about to make a fool of himself. You see, I'm James, his editor, and by the time it took him to actually put that, well, what he calls a script, because he doesn't script, together, and then give it to me, he'd already hit the 100 subs target. So, I'll thank you personally, and I'll just roll the rest of this and let him keep embarrassing himself by saying he's looking forward to getting to 100 subs. Me, however, I hope you can get us to 1,000 subs, because I'm not a small fry, not like him. So, let's get back to him. Now, in the short space of time I've been putting out these videos, I have grown to almost 100 subscribers. At last count I was at 97, so if you're watching this and not yet subscribed, feel free, hit that subscribe button and become one of the first 100. Anyway, back onto the meat and bones of this particular video, and today I would like to reveal to you my top 5 JRPGs. Now, it is without shame that I can hand on heart say I am most definitely an RPG guy. And I know RPGs aren't everyone's cup of tea, but there are a lot of us out there. So, for you guys, let's have a look at my top 5 JRPGs. Now, of course, these 5 games mean so much to me that they are so close together that any one of them could have been the top spot. But of course, at the end I had to sit down, bite the bullet and put these games into an order that would fit a list. You can't have 5 games all on the top spot. So, to get this turn-based battle started, I'll present game number 5, Grandia II. Now, Grandia II is extremely lucky to be on this list. Not that it doesn't deserve it, it's just a matter of timing. And the timing was, I got my hands on it before Final Fantasy X. Had Tidus and the boys rolled across first, then maybe I wouldn't have played Grandia II, or at least not for a long while. But the fact was, Grandia II did make it out first. Into my hands, into my PlayStation 2, and what a wonderful game it was. As with most JRPGs, it's set against the backdrop of a good versus evil battle. In this case, Lord Granus, the good, apparently, fighting the evil darkness of Valar. Now, of course, it's a JRPG, it's not quite as black and white as that. And the story of the young geohound Ryudo, tasked with being the bodyguard of the songstress of Granus, Elena, is one that will take many twists and turns before you get to the end. But other than the story, what really puts this game on this list is none other than the battle system. Yes, it's still a turn-based battle system like many other RPGs of the time, but unlike many others of the time, it wasn't 2 opposing rows of characters facing off against each other, taking one turn after the other. Instead, your team could move about a small field of battle, which could either aid or hinder you depending on which area of effect spells you were casting or being cast against you. Also, another fantastic little mechanic was you could interrupt the enemy's play, or they could interrupt yours. It was an active time battle much like Final Fantasy VII, but there was a period right at the end of each character's turn where if they were hit with a critical hit, it would cancel their turn completely. Now, if you've never played this game, I heartily recommend it. Of course I do, it's on my top 5 list. And if you have played it, I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about. So number 5, Grandia II. Moving on to game number 4, the game that just pipped Grandia for me was Breath of Fire 3. A fantastic JRPG that was just on the cusp of 3D gaming, and you can tell because it's not quite 2D, it's not quite 3D. It's what we like to call in the community a 2.5D. In other words, There were aspects of 3D. You could change slightly the player's perspective, which meant you could just about see round corners or around obstacles that often shielded important parts of the game from your vision if you didn't turn your map. More importantly for me, your main protagonist was a dragon. Now don't get me wrong, we're not talking about controlling a big lumbering winged fire-breathing beastie from start to finish of the game. No, your main protagonist did look human and only ever called upon his dragon form while in battle. And if this is not enough of a hook for you, your character could find genes scattered around the game, which meant he could upgrade his dragon abilities, starting off as a whelp, a little pup dragon, which you could upgrade, and eventually becoming a behemoth that could wipe out any enemy in your path. So basically, what Breath of Fire did was it took away magic per se from your main character and turned that into the dragon forms that your character could eventually utilise in battle. Which leads me nicely onto the magic itself, because what's RPG without magic? And one thing I really enjoyed about the magic system when it came to Breath of Fire 3 was that your characters in your party could combine their magic and pull off a much stronger and more devastating spell. For example, if one character cast wind and the other fire side by side, instead of your enemy being hit by the fire spell then the wind spell, both spells would then combine into a much more powerful spell. In this case it would be Summon. And let me tell you, the first time I saw a combined spell, it blew my mind. So Breath of Fire 3 well worthy and at number 4. At number 3 on the list is the most modern of all the games that are on this top 5. And that game is Ni no Kuni Wrath of the White Witch. And what it was about the Wrath of the White Witch that made it such a solid contender for my top 5 was that it combined 3 factors. Firstly, it had all your traditional JRPG elements, mechanics that wouldn't have been out of place in the Final Fantasy series. Secondly, it had a Pokemon-like collectathon mechanic. Now if you take Final Fantasy elements, throw in a dash of Pokemon elements, you're starting to really entice me into a game. And then there was the third fact. The fact that this gorgeous Final Fantasy Pokemon baby was being dressed exclusively by Studio Ghibli, who designed the look and of course the storyline. An almost holy trinity of elements that has without a doubt made it one of the best JRPGs of all time. And all I can say is, if you haven't played Ni no Kuni Wrath of the White Witch, put it onto your to-do list as soon as possible. And now we're down to the last 2, number 2 and number 1. Now let me tell you, if all 5 of these games were so close that each one could have been first, the battle between 1 and 2 in my head was horrendous. But of course, I had to choose a winner. I had to choose one game above the rest. And for number 2, I finally decided to go with Zuikoden 2. Now Zuikoden 2 is very similar in, let's say, genetic build-up to Ni no Kuni. It has the traditional JRP turn-based mechanics. It has a collectathon of 108 separate characters that you can find, recruit and add to your party in one form or another. In graphics and in art design, well, it's not quite Studio Ghibli because it's more of a game from the 16-bit era. But if you do have a special place in your heart for 16-bit and 8-bit graphics, then this game will be right up your street. But the reason that it pips Ni no Kuni is quite simply the depth of the story. Don't get me wrong, Ni no Kuni has a lovely, wonderful story, quite heartwarming and quite devastating at times. But Zuikoden is based on the sweeping Chinese epic, The Water Margin. And the game goes into the story in such depth that it's utterly breathtaking. I mean, I almost dare you to try and find one of the 108 characters, or even the antagonists, that don't have a level of depth that you rarely see in even modern games. So for me, it's often quite unbelievable that Zuikoden 2 is placed at number 2 on my JRPG list. Now that leaves us with one more game to go, my number 1 JRPG. And I'll be frankly honest, there has been a hint through the entirety of this video, and the hint is sitting here on the chest. That's correct. For me, there was only one game that could even remotely pip Zuikoden to the number 1 spot, and that was Final Fantasy VII. And the game, being what it is probably the only game on this list where everyone, whether you've played it or not, knows exactly what Final Fantasy VII is. But I need a justification. I need to explain why Final Fantasy VII just managed to pip Zuikoden 2 to the number 1 spot. And for me, it's quite simply the main protagonist, Cloud Strife. I absolutely dare anyone to find a video game character, nay, I dare you to find any character in any medium that is quite as complex as Cloud Strife. I mean, even decades on, I'm not sure I even understand Cloud Strife. Not totally. And I've been neck deep in Final Fantasy VII since 1997 when it was released. So there you have it, folks. The top 5, one of the hardest lists I've ever put together. And I'll run them again for you. So 5, we have Grandia II. 4, Breath of Fire 3. 3, Ni no Kuni, The Wrath of the White Witch. 2, Zuikoden 2. Just. And number 1, Final Fantasy VII. Thank you very much for watching this video, and if you haven't already subscribed, please do. As I said earlier, I'm so close to 100 subscribers, and I'd love for you to be part of that first 100 club. So thank you again, and until next time, bye!